Okay, I guess we'll start. Thank you for coming, and thank you for everybody on the web that's watching this via our webcast. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to the National Museum of American Indian, and I would ask a little housekeeping, cell phones, if you just turn them off or silent them, that'd be great. Okay, today's program is coming from Nome, Alaska, so we would ask also for some patience in our technical switching back and forth, and I would like to thank our media department here at NMAI for their fabulous coordination between Nome, Alaska here and our people at the zoo. In our I'm looking at Emil. Yeah, we're just going to close the doors here. Okay. We would like to start off with a blessing, and our Emil Her Many Horses, who is Oglala Lakota from South Dakota, will give us a blessing.
Thank you, Rosita. I also would like to thank the organizers of this for inviting me to come and share some of the work that we did on behalf of the museum. So at this time, we'll offer a blessing. So Heavenly Creator, we call upon you at this time, and we give you thanks for gathering us today so that we may share our collective works as we work on behalf of the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere, as we also talk about our relationship with land, animals, and with one another. All these things, Heavenly Creator, we ask you to continue to guide us and to teach us how to live amongst our environment. Ho, medake ase, all my relations. Thank you. So, can I just go right into this? That easy. Again, thank you. As was mentioned, I'm one of the museum curators here at the National Museum of the American Indian, and I've been asked to talk about our process in which we worked on our inaugural exhibits that we opened in 2004. At the opening in 2004, we had work for 5 years behind the scene, developing exhibitions, and this is the process in which we developed. Of the 3 inaugural exhibits, the one I was a lead curator for was called Our Universes, which talked about Native philosophies. The other 2 are Peoples, Tribal Histories, and Our Lives, which was Contemporary Identity. The Our Universe exhibits, as I stated, talks about tribal philosophies, Our Peoples, Tribal Histories, and Our Lives, Tribal Identities. Now, we had 3 curatorial teams that were organized to work with these 3 inaugural exhibits. And we selected, I hope you can kind of read that, but we selected 24 Native groups from throughout the whole Western Hemisphere to work with. Each inaugural exhibit worked with 8 communities. Our universes, we talked about how traditional knowledge shapes our world. And what we began with was developing a curatorial narrative in which we submitted to a group of Native and non-Native scholars. And we did that in, seems like just yesterday, but it was 1999. And once they approved this narrative, we moved, and this is the introductory text for our gallery, and it said, in this gallery, you'll discover how Native peoples understand their place in the universe and order their daily lives. Our philosophy of life comes from our ancestors. They taught us to live in harmony with animals, plants, spiritual world, and the people around us. So this was the basic text that we went through the exhibition with. The 8 communities I worked with, a criteria for working with each of these communities was, of course, Western Hemisphere. And they also had to have an annual communal ceremony, which we were able to pull the philosophy from that ceremony and have some sort of built structure. And you'll understand this when I go through the exhibition, or go through the process here. So for the Oglala Lakota, we chose what was called the Sundance. And if you can see in the circle there, and if you go into our Universes gallery, you'll be able to see how it's represented 4 directions, north, south, east, and west, and also Mother Earth, and also the sky, in which the Great Spirit or the Great Mystery resides. For the Hupa, we selected what was called the jump dance, and this is what they called their church house, and also the Yupik from Alaska, in which we worked with them and to develop the concept of to understand the men's house. Now, these were the 8 communities that we selected for our Universes: the Pueblo of Santa Clara, the Anishinaabe from the Halawata community in Canada, in Manitoba, the Oglala Lakota from South Dakota, Quechua from Peru, the Hupa from California, the Quechua from Guatemala, the Mapuche from Chile, and also the Yupik from Alaska. So this is the basic design element, and we organized each of the communal spaces according to their annual communal ceremony. Our phases of work was we did all of our background research on each of the communities, and then we went into the communities and invited them to come and work with us. We brought all those communities here for the basic workshop. We went back to the communities with a content review, with a design review, and the script review. We brought contemporary artists, or we brought Native artists to come and work with our conservation department. And we also did some virtual web projects, and then we brought everyone here for the opening. Actually, we brought everyone from the 24 communities here for the opening. Now, in our preparation work, we did all of our background research for each of the communities. We produced a bibliography. We consulted with an academic scholar who then put us in touch with a community scholar, and that community scholar became our contact within the community. They also identified people to work with within that community. Now, on our basic invitation, working with the community scholar, he gathered all the people. This is a photo of the Guatemala Quechua priests. This was a really unique situation because, for one, I don't speak Spanish, but neither did the Guatemalan priests. They spoke the Mayan language. And so the man in the center there with the glasses on the right side was actually our interpreter. And so things would be translated from English, translated to Spanish, then translated to Maya, and the conversation went that way throughout the whole process in which we were working. We also went to the Mapuche from Chile, working with their spiritual leaders, Machi Gerardo, Machi Yolanda. And one of the basic questions Machi Gerardo asked is, why does a museum in Washington, D.C. want to represent us? And so we told them that we represent all Native peoples, indigenous peoples from the Western Hemisphere, and we wanted to include them into our exhibition. And they agreed. They said that they would work with us on this project. Now, once we were able to everyone to agree with working with us, We then brought them to our research facility in Suitland, Maryland, to look at their objects. So, and photograph, our photo collection. Now you have to remember at this time, we were moving these collections out of New York. Over 840,000 objects were being moved, and we were working with 24 communities that wanted to look at their collections. So we had a very interesting schedule that was set up. We identified the communities that we were working with, and they were the first their objects were the first to be brought down. So if there were 5,000 objects in their collection, 5,000 objects were laid out for them to review. And so this is the Hupa from California, and they're reviewing all their material to be selected for the exhibition. Now the men that you see here, one David Risling is the first person on the left. He was our academic scholar, or community scholar, academic and community scholar. He was from the Hupa, Karuk, and Yurok tribe. And the other two men, Merv George Jr. and Merv George Sr., were the spiritual leaders of their dance group. And so they were in looking, I don't know if you can see behind there, but their wives and wives are behind looking at some of the women's material that would be featured in the exhibition. This is the Pueblo of Santa Clara, and one of the unique things about this one is the fact that they were discussing what should be presented into their exhibition. You can see on they were drawing it out on paper, but it was all done in the Tewa language. They finally turned around and said, who would like to translate this for Emil, what we've decided? And one of them then translated what they had come up with to be represented in each of their space. This is Mark Thompson from the Anishinaabe, from the Halawado community in Canada. And we had originally proposed that we show what was called the Medeowin Lodge. And they had decided that that was something that was too sacred and sensitive to show at this point. And one of the things they wanted to show what was called the Teaching Lodge, which was done in their community in the spring. And so that's what we ended up showing. And you can see with his diagram, he's setting up and showing us which groups sit where men and women, children are seated within this space. Now, once we gathered that first information, selected objects, selected photographs, also we kept in mind of what new material they may require us to have. We were very fortunate to have an acquisition budget in which we were able to obtain objects that were not represented into our collection. We took the material back for review. I wanted to show you this photograph because if you notice, there's a bottle of wine in the middle of this. There's also coca leaves. Nazario, who's the man in the middle, was the spiritual leader, and then his friend Octavo is over on the side here, and then Dr. Carmona. They're all Quechua, but they said because we were doing sacred work and talking about sacred things, we had to make offerings as we were doing this. And so wine was used as an offering, chewing of coca leaves at the same time as we were doing this. So it could be 10 in the morning, and they will pour a little wine, and then they would offer a prayer, and then they would give it to someone. So we had to make sure we had a good breakfast that morning. But this is what they said, because we were talking sacred materials, that we needed to do these offerings as we were proceeding. Here we are with the Yupik elders. Again, we had the lady on the bottom there in the red. She is our translator, Marie Mead, and she was working with us to translate for the Yupik elders who spoke Yupik, and so they were the last generation to actually be raised in what was called a men's house, to have ceremonies conducted in the men's house. And later they would be conducted in a school gymnasium as opposed to a men's house. Now, the men's house is where the young men went to be taught by the elders, to be taught to be respected, hunting, and how to live a good life. And they said actually the young women went there to bring food and to be instructed by the elders of what it meant to be a good community member. Once all this information was decided, we turned it over to our design team, Howard Rivas, and the two designers would come up with a concept, and I, as a curator, would come up on behalf of the community and say, well, I think this is the way we should go, and this is the way, and basically be kind of the first review. But then we took it back to the community, and we took these scale models back to the community. This is Jeff, our designer, and they reviewed each of the spaces that was presented. So we flew these models back and explained to the community what was intended. Now, this is the Pueblo of Santa Clara, in which we flew in to present to their tribal government, to the governor and his, and also their staff and the community people that we were working with. And the moment we stepped off the plane, we received a phone call that said that someone had passed away in the Pueblo. And what that meant for us was that the Pueblo was closed. But they granted us 1 hour to come in and to do our presentation. And then after that, because we had come a long way, and then after that, the community would be closed. So our designer, we went in, we did our presentation of how we envisioned the gallery to be, and they approved the design concept for us. Our designer tried to continue asking questions, and they said, nope, we're closed now. And so we got our designer out of there. We went back to the community with after transcribing all the interviews that we did with the community. We also went into the community with our media component, or with our media team. So if there was any requests that they wanted to be featured within that gallery, then this was the time in which we went in and completed that. Now, in some cases, well, most cases, we did honor the requests from the community, and this one, Nazario, Turpo, wanted us to come to his community, to his home, and feature his family. And we also took photographs of each of the members, and he wanted to share with us his family, and also he said his animals. And so this was an interesting undertaking because it has new meaning for me when they say in Peru it's the rainy season. because we took a bus up to the side of this mountain during the rainy season and had to walk in the last mile because our bus got stuck and we couldn't go in any further. But Nazario was very gracious, and he actually, throughout this time, we had several community meals that were offered and given to us, and we were able to photograph, at his request, his family to be featured, which was important to him. We also did our media components, interviewing our elders, here in this case, the Yupik elders. I was quite concerned about them sitting there all day long as we were doing this, and I was trying to rush them along a little bit. And one of the consultants said, wait a minute, we still have some things to talk about here. So we just had to sit back and let them share with us the knowledge that they felt that was important. Now, one of the things about working with these community members was the fact that they took on a great undertaking to be featured here in the museum, because they wanted the world to know that they were still here and they were still practicing these traditions. And so they took this on upon themselves. We also brought in conservation artists to work with our conservators, and these are some of the ladies from the Pine Ridge Reservation. When it was first recommended that we work on restoring some of the objects that were going to be on display, it was a concern on the part of our conservation department at the time that we stabilize and we don't restore. But these ladies said for what they represented, it was important to have these objects restored. So these traditional artists worked with our conservation department to restore these objects to be on display. One of the comments from our conservation people were that we did not have the materials or we didn't have the knowledge to do that. But the ladies said, we have the material and we have the knowledge and we'll come and share that with you. And so they did. It was a great undertaking, and I think both sides benefited from it. This is Teresa Gutierrez working on some of the pottery from the from the Pueblo of Santa Clara that was going to go on display. They asked, one of the questions to Teresa was, how do we clean the pots? And Teresa came back and said, well, with soap and water, of course. And so they let Teresa clean the pots. And this is the Hupa this is Merv George Jr., and he was actually showing us how things should go on display. And if you have gone into the Hupa gallery, you'll see where we have several of the mannequins that are wearing traditional and ceremonial objects, and he wanted to show us exactly how these should be installed in the exhibition. And our Yupik elders, we are actually looking at a walrus gut parka. The lady on the right, the older lady on the right there, her name was Teresa Moses. And she said something in Yupik, and I asked Marie, our chancellor, I said, what did she say? And she said, well, Teresa said that old thing. Because it had a lot of museum dust on it and things like that. And I don't think she wanted to quite represent us in their space. And so I asked them, I said, well, where can I get another one? And they said, well, Teresa can make one for you. And eventually, what we ended up doing was having Teresa make us a new one that is on display. So this is actually a seal gut parka. I asked them if the smell ever goes away, and they go, no, you just get used to it. So. Now, at the opening of the museum, we were able to bring all the consultants into their spaces, and they were able to conduct, this is the Santa Clara Pueblo, which is set up in a four-directional element with the 4 colors of corn. And also, they wanted to talk about stages of life and what it was like to be raised within their community. That as an infant, the community takes care of you, and as youth, you start to learn your responsibility, and then adulthood, you become an active part of the community and what it means to govern and to be a family member. And then the elderly, we go into the elderly section in which they are still teachers of the young. And this is the space for the Santa Clara with the Ibanyu, the water serpent featured on the bottom of the floor, and they wanted to have this opening so that when it's a drought season, they pray to the Ibanyu and it turns and it'll bring water through that space. This is the Quechua Maya, the priest from the Quechua Maya. And again, this is set up on a 4-direction with the 4 colors of corn. They also wanted to include the 4 colors of the beans, and it's set up, again, like I said, the 4 directions. This is their space. The Hupa wanted to include the dances that they do to bring harmony into the world and to chase out the disease, war, pestilence, war. And so this is what's called the white deerskin dance that they featured in the back there. And this is, okay, I think I'm gonna wind it up anyway. And so this is their space. They also wanted to have featured in there what was called, from their church house, in which they actually donated, and it was also important to have it be cedar, that the walls be decorated with cedar from their community. And so all the wood that you see in the structure was actually donated by the community to be installed in the exhibition. The Anishinaabe from Hollowater. These are the consultants for that space, and they did, like what I said, it was the teaching lodge in which they talk about the cultural hero, Waterboy, who brought the traditions back to the community, teachings from the animal world and to the plant world and the plant life. And these are the elders from the community. We also put each of their photographs, crediting them in their photographs as the consultants, and we call them the community curators for this exhibition. When they walked into their space, they said this is how they, oh, these are the photographs for each of our people, our community curators. And when they walked into the space, they said this is how they remembered the men's lodge being when they were growing up. We included several of the objects, several of the Yupik masks, in which were some of the masks showing animals, also showing, there's one on the bottom that has a large circle on there, and they said this was to ask for good wind, good weather while they're out hunting. And also with the animals featured on there, they wanted to honor the animals as saying that these animal spirits will go back and talk to the animals and say, it's all right to give yourselves to these people, give your lives to them, they take good care of you, and they go back. One of the things in working with these communities, and especially the Yupik, was that as we were working and scheduling them to come and consult with us, we also had to be aware of various seasons. One time we called them and asked if they could come. They said, no, the blackfish are running, and then the salmon are coming. Or we would call them and say, can you come at this certain time? They go, no, that's berry picking season, or seal hunting season. So we had to be aware of the fact of their subsistent style of living in scheduling our visits with them. I think that's it. So. And if you have any questions, we'll have some time to talk about those later. So thank you.